Hello and welcome to Arts and Entertainment.
With Chris and Randall.
I'm Chris
I'm Randall.
and welcome to the show. Uh, Today we're going to look at the films and acting career of Robin Williams. And if you're new to the show, or if you're old to the show, as always, I like to start the show by saying, please like, subscribe, comment, and share. And Randall, what's the best way to reach us if you want to talk to us?
Our Facebook page for the show, Arts and Entertainment with Chris and Randall, is fairly popular. You can leave a comment. But yeah, check out our website, chrisandrandall.com, for various ways to make contact with us and download our show and listen to our show.
Thanks, Randall. I would really like to hear what you have to say, especially about this episode where we did try to do a little bit more audience participation. It's We're recording this in 2021. It's the beginning of summer of 2021, and we're coming up on our rather sad anniversary, which is the passing of beloved actor, comic Robin Williams. I thought this would be a really good time to just do an appreciation of him. You could do a whole thing on him as a stand-up. You could do a whole thing. He was such a versatile and talented actor and comic and improviser. We could do 3 different shows, but today we just wanted to focus on him as an actor and some of his films that we asked people what they liked and films that we feel are overlooked, and really just kind of do a deep dive into Robin Williams, as well as also have a personal story about him. So before we even get into this, I got to ask you, Randall, not your favorite or anything, but what's the first time you remember ever seeing Robin Williams?
Well, like a lot of people, it's probably Mork and Mindy, the TV show.
Yeah, me too. Mork and Mindy was the first TV show. I think that's absolutely. I saw him on the episode of Happy Days where the character premiered, and that's the first time I remembered him. So I was very stoked when 12-year-old me was very much into science fiction, was going to get to see this character, and his style was like nothing I'd ever seen before, right? I mean, when you see him as a kid, right, he does voices, he uses his body in odd way. I mean, as a child, do you remember thinking how different
Yeah,
he
I
was?
think the TV show Mork and Mindy was very popular with kids. I mean, it's science fiction-y, it's kind of cartoony, it was done humorously. It didn't take itself seriously. The If you ever saw Third Rock from the Sun and not Mork and Mindy, the tone was similar to Third Rock from the Sun, I would say. I'll say something else about the show is Robin Williams was not, if I remember the history of the show right, Robin Williams was not originally cast to be the lead in that show.
No?
Yeah, I can't remember who it was, but it was somebody else, and then that person, for some reason, they couldn't do the show. And one of the producers or somebody working on the show had seen Robin Williams in San Francisco. So Robin Williams was just like pretty much an unknown. But, he was so electric in the comedy clubs, in stand-up clubs in the 70s. Or, I don't know, was it the 60s or 70s?
No, the 70s.
It was in the 70s. And, stand-up started in the 70s. So the modern stand-up as we think of it, the stand-up clubs really started in the 70s. So Robin Williams was right there on the cutting edge.
The way I heard that story was actually that Gary Marshall's son saw him in one of those comedy clubs.
Well, there you go. So he
recommended him to his dad.
Recommended him because they needed somebody, and he was cast. I mean, that kind of rags to riches story, that kind of like this story of discovery in Hollywood. It's not the norm. I mean, they exist. People love to share those stories, but they're not normal stories. I mean, you have to be a real. You have to have something. You have to be very unusual for something like that to happen to you. And Robin Williams was that unusual person. I just want to say one more thing about the show, is so he's cast on the show, and if you remember, there are segments on the show where Robin Williams gives reports back to his home planet. He talks to Orson, and it's on a blackened stage, and he's speaking to Orson, who's not visible, who doesn't speak back. And Robin Williams is, am I getting this right, Chris? it's been a while since I've seen the show. And
More calling Orson. Come in, Orson.
And Robin Williams is just talking to Orson, and it's just like a monologue from Robin Williams.
Right. Yeah.
And from what I've heard, it was if I remember what I've read and heard in the past about this, they just let Robin Williams riff.
It's he just the precursor to Seinfeld cut it down. And his stand-up monologue that he would do at the end of every episode of Seinfeld, if you remember.
Right, and I just want to say that that formula of just like letting Robin Williams riff and recording it and then cutting it down later, that was a formula that would follow Robin Williams in his whole career for almost every project he did.
Let's take a step back before Mork and Mindy to just show you how he got to Mork and Mindy, because I think in talking about the origin story, like any superhero, I think you'll get a better understanding of where his powers come from. He was born in a Chicago suburb at a young age. His family, to a fairly prosperous upper middle class family, his dad worked for Ford. Then quickly they moved to a suburb of Detroit, where a lot of Ford executives lived. And at the age of 16, he moved to Tiburon, California, which for those of you who are not in California is literally under the bridge, right? It's the San Francisco Bay. It's in the heart of Marin County. Gorgeous place, seriously, right near Sausalito. So he grew up in Northern California in the 60s, probably the most interesting time, around the time of Haight-Ashbury and the hippie movement. Literally next door to him was Haight-Ashbury. Literally next door to him as he was a teenager in high school is all that makes what hippiedom. He is in Oliver Twist. He plays Fagin. He gets bitten by the drama bug. He becomes the big kid in high school who goes out for all the plays. And in his graduation, in his high school graduation yearbook, he is voted the most likely not to succeed. Can you believe that, Randall? And also the funniest by his classmates. And he enrolls in Claremont College, which was at that time a men's college, to study political science. And then very quickly, he drops out to pursue his first love, acting, which I can relate to because A, I applied to Claremont and was rejected. And also B, I was a poli-sci major. But hold on.
Yeah, I didn't know that about you, Chris. You were a poli-sci major as an undergrad?
I was a poli-sci major as an undergrad.
Why? So you got a master's in
playwriting.
Playwriting.
I got bitten by a theater in high school as well, as Robin Williams did. Of course, our paths went on very different directions.
Why didn't you...
hold on, I'm getting there. So anyway...
But why political science?
Because I like government, which is probably why he liked it too. I mean, it's one of those things where who knows what we think we should be versus who we turn out to be. But I didn't have this great success. So he graduates in 1969. He goes to a community college. In 1973, Williams gets a full scholarship to Juilliard in New York City, which at that time is the beginning of the program. You know Juilliard, right, Randall? One of the most prestigious acting programs.
Performance school.
He was one of 20 students accepted into the freshman class. That's how competitive it was. And then he and Christopher Reeve would go on to play Superman. They were one of only 2 accepted into the advanced program at that school, taught by, get this, John Houseman. You remember John Houseman? Which is very amusing for you friends of mine who are older. John Houseman, about a year or 2 later, would do a movie called The Paper Chase, where he would play Professor Kingsley, a law school professor at Harvard, which would then go on to a TV series. So I cannot help but think of John Houseman as Professor Kingsley from The Paper Chase somehow as also being, the man who picks Robin Williams. Mr. Hall.
Houseman epitomized with that character a professor.
He really did. He was so, so this is where it gets even really fascinating because his other classmates are William Hurt and Mandy Patinkin. Reeve says of his impression of Robin Williams, when he first met him, he wore tie-dye shirts with the tracksuit bottoms and talked a mile a minute. I'd never seen so much energy contained in one person. He was like an untied balloon that had been inflated, immediately released. I watched in awe of his virtually carooned off the walls, off the classrooms and hallways. To say that he was on would be a major understatement. They studied under one of the greatest voice teachers of the 20th century, Edith Skinner, which does, I think, explain why he was so good at voices. Skinner, according to biographers, said that she was bewildered by Williams and his ability to instantly perform many different accents. Their primary acting teacher was a man named Michael Kahn, who was equally baffled by this human dynamo. Williams had already a reputation for being funny, but Kahn criticized his antics as simple stand-up comedy. In a latter production, Williams silenced his critics with a well-received performance as an old man in Tennessee Williams' Night of the Iguana. He left Juilliard 3 years in his junior year in 1976, and I love this, at the suggestion of Houseman, who said there was nothing more. I want to do this as Houseman. There is nothing more that Juilliard could teach you, which is a bit of a. I don't think anyone leaves this school for that reason, to be honest with you, which is why another professor of his, Gerald Friedman, says Williams was a genius and that the school's conservative and classical style of training did not suit him, and no one was surprised he left. And then from there, he gets to San Francisco in 76, where he's doing experimental stand-up comedy. The year later, he gets to LA, where he's performing at the Comedy Store. Then in 77, before Mork and Mindy, he's discovered by George Schlachter, who produced the original Laugh-In, and he gets cast in a revival of the show. And around that same time, HBO films one of his first comedy specials, one of the young comics. And that is really kind of where we're getting. Now, also that same time, and missing from Wikipedia, and I don't know why, because I was a student of one of his, he was heavily into improv in the LA comedy scene. I had a teacher of mine, Cynthia Seghetti, who did improv with Robin around that period of time that he was living in LA, around the time that he was doing Laugh-In, around the time that he was breaking. And they just here only mentioned that he did improv in Williams as part of a group called the Fighting Cocks. And then I think you cannot, Randall, we'll get into this later in the show, but I definitely feel like stand-up and improv are two things that really inform, as you just said, his talents as an actor, right? I mean, he's improvising like crazy on Mork and Mindy.
He's a natural for both stand-up and improv. And, you know, I guess in some ways he's really lucky that both stand-up and improv became a thing in the late 60s, 70s. So Robin Williams was perfectly suited to be born in that moment. I'm surprised that he lasted 2.5 years at Juilliard. That's amazing to me. I would think he would last like no more than a year. I mean, I can't imagine how horrible that was for him.
Well, I mean, on one hand, I think he is. It gets to, I think, what's something that will haunt Robin Williams the rest of his acting career, which is that Robin Williams knows how to act, and I mean that in the most traditional manner. He is good at classical repertoire. He would perform in Waiting for Godot on Broadway. You know, he had the chops to just be like his contemporaries, another Mandy Patinkin, another William Hurt. You could subtract the funny from Robin Williams. And unlike, say, you know, he's in a weird period in history because prior to the 1970s, Hollywood didn't really have a lot of funny men for a while. And then all of a sudden, stand-up breaks, Saturday Night Live breaks, and all of a sudden you've got people like Chevy Chase and Steve Martin and Bill Murray, and they're all of a sudden playing leading men in comedies, because prior to that, you were stuck with people like Elliot Gould and Alan Arkin and Donald Sutherland. No offense to those men, but they were actors first. So their ability to sell a joke, their ability to really, actors playing comedy versus comics playing comedy, it's just it's a different rhythm. And the thing about Chevy Chase, the thing about Bill Murray, and even the thing about Steve Martin was all of these men, like Robin Williams, were actors as well as comics. So they could kind of draw the balance between the two. And Robin, of course, so is very different. And it's kind of sad because the first film he does is Popeye, which a lot of people consider to be a bomb, but you saw Popeye, right? What's the story with Popeye? His first film, after Mork and Mindy, is a Robert Altman film. Robert Altman, one of the big directors, and you said something really true, which is that Robin Williams is like a cartoon. And what distinguished Robin Williams from even a Steve Martin, even a Bill Murray, who were zany like crazy, is that when you watched Robin Williams as a kid, you're like, wait a second, that's like a cartoon character come to life. I think, in fairness, ABC did do a Mork and Mindy Saturday morning cartoon series. So, and cartoons is an important thing. But it makes sense that the very first thing he's cast as in film is a cartoon character. He is in the live action. Robert Altman, one of the most serious filmmakers, did this. Popeye. I didn't see Popeye when it came out. I won't lie to you because it got poor reviews and I was such a diehard fan of Robin Williams. I didn't want to see him suck, but you saw it. Tell me about it.
Well, if you're not familiar with Robert Altman is one of the star directors of the 70s. And back then, with the whole auteur theory, they let directors do whatever they wanted. And Altman had this weird style. He could have only existed during that era. Altman has this weird style where he has people talk over each other. And that's like, most people think that's like a complete no-no. You never do that. Like in classic Hollywood movies, you'd never have people step on each other's lines, talk over each other's lines. But Altman pioneered that technique because he thought that that's how normal conversation sounded. And I believe to this day he's the only director, only person in Hollywood that still does that, has ever done that. I can't think of another project or director that does that.
Certainly only a few. And Popeye was not an art house film. It was a big studio production.
Yeah, so Popeye is like a giant studio production, but I think when they make Popeye, I'd have to look it up, but I think the intellectual property of Popeye is long since in the public domain. So they're thinking the producers think they're gonna have this cash grab, right? They're gonna take this intellectual property that's just everybody knows about, and it's in the public domain. It's free.
I don't think was it in the public domain because he's was alive.
I don't know. I'd have to look it up, but I think that's the reason.
But it was certainly it was not expensive to get the rights. It was a major,
right?
Considering the amount of money that the studio had, and then by 1980, because of the success of Superman, they were beginning to make comic book strip like Annie and such.
Exactly.
It was into movies. It was a very
and so right.
Cool
so
idea.
Popeye's the next
Bring the
one.
kids in. Kids
right.
like Robin Williams, they'll love Popeye.
Right. They got Robin Williams, who's like a human cartoon character, and they got the Popeye property. And now all they need is like a star director, right? And like,
yeah,
and for some crazy reason, like maybe the producers had never watched an Altman movie. I don't know.
Yeah,
they pick Altman. I mean, Altman is like the worst choice for a comic book movie like of all time. I mean, it's just because no one wants to watch a comic book seriously. No one's gonna want to like. Most audiences aren't going to like a comic book movie directed by Robert Altman. Like it's.
And wasn't it Shelley Duvall who played Olive Oyl?
Yes, and Shelley Duvall. That's another interesting casting choice. It's a good one because Shelley Duvall. I mean, this would be another show, but I would argue Shelley Duvall as an actress was the luckiest great actress of all time. She got to work with like just about every star director of the 70s.
Great stuff. Yeah.
She got to play like. Just about, I mean, all her roles were amazing roles. I mean, even the Olive Oyl role is a great role. I mean, every star director of the 70s loved her. All the producers loved her. She was in everything. She got to play every single kind of part that a woman ever gets to play. And I think
she actually filmed The Shining right after this.
Yeah, which is amazing,
I'm not joking. Like she went from working with him to Kubrick.
I know, so amazing.
She was on a roll.
I just want to say, Altman discovered her. By the way,
yeah,
she was she was on a roll. So how was the movie? Well,
how was the movie? So I'm on
being that it's an Altman movie and everybody's talking over each other all the time. you have to understand that's what's gonna be. That's what the movie's gonna be like. And then here's a funny thing about the Popeye character. If you know Popeye, he mumbles,
Yeah.
and you can't really understand what he's saying most of the time. I mean, that's like the idea behind Popeye. Now take an Altman take Robert was it Robert Altman? Take Altman and like you layer on top of Popeye's mumbling other people talking all the time. Audiences are gonna hate it, okay? But if you just watch Popeye like for the fun of it, for the fun of watching the performances and the fun of just the the physicalness of it, it's good. I mean, they built like this whole fishing village, like I don't know where it was, in Europe somewhere, and I believe the fishing village is now like a tourist attraction.
Oh wow.
If I remember
So
right.
it's a good performance by Williams, or is it a strange performance? I mean, I don't know how anyone
It's great.
would ever play
It's great.
Popeye.
I know. How do you evaluate? But yeah, I think it's beautiful. I mean, I think like if you watch it, you will see. I mean, Williams is Popeye. It's truly amazing, the performance. I believe.
Now,
I mean, he is completely inhabited the cartoon character. I mean, like I don't know if anybody's even accomplished that before.
it definitely seems like if anyone was going to play him, it had to be him. I went on my Facebook news feed and I asked a number of people I know, I have all friends of all ages and backgrounds, what their favorite Robin Williams films were. That one did come up as one of the slightly more forgotten, obscure ones that time has not remembered. But considering that Robin Williams' film career goes from 1980 to 2014, and in fairness, some films that were released after his death. So some of his films came out in 2016. He did well over 100 films. We're not going to cover more than a speck of that, but we've broken it down into the stuff that you guys liked and the stuff that we felt was overlooked. And then we broke down what you guys like into two different distinct categories, which is Robin Williams supporting actor, Robin Williams leading man, because he's one of the few actors who was able to have, I mean, you rarely see this in Hollywood, someone who really has a great career as a leading man while simultaneously having a great career as a supporting actor. Normally the supporting actor roles come before you become a lead or once you're no longer bankable as a lead. But he would just trade on and off, which maybe does come from improv, because I know that in improv, you're always trained to be supportive of the ensemble.
Well, I mean, when you do improv, you are doing a mind meld with your scene partner or partners, and you're bouncing off of each other. I mean, what's the famous line about acting? Acting is reacting.
Yeah.
So
that's very Meisner-esque. So you're right. You're playing off of what's being presented, and you're building. You're, what is it called? Yes and
in improv. Yeah. So you're supposed to accept whatever your scene partner is doing and add to it. That's what you do in improv, and
that's probably what really showed, because we're going to look at actually 5 films that we're supporting. We're going to look at fewer as leading, because it's I would argue, weirdly enough, as a supporting actor, to me, he's pretty standout. And the film that almost everyone, the most popular film that people brought up, one he was nominated for Best Supporting Actor, no surprise there, was Good Will Hunting, where he played the therapist who is assigned to the Matt Damon character. Notice how I don't use character names. And you have these great therapy sessions where, Matt Damon's literally playing the smartest person in the room. And, technically, Robin Williams has to play someone who either can match him in intellect or at least contain him. And that's a pretty hard role. I mean, normally when you see therapists played in film, they're normally always very chill, very abstract, very analytical, very... So, Randall, you're the hero of the story. I'm going to talk like this, and every so often I'm going to stop, and I'm just going to say, tell me more. Or I'll say, Randall, I think your problem can be boiled down to this. But as the ability to play, he plays a man who's so rattled, who's full of rage, whose own emotions. There's a moment where he's literally about to punch him,
He does a lot of actual acting in Good Will Hunting, right? I mean, he
plays a man mourning the loss for his wife while trying to help this kid who he believes is so traumatized that he can't really get in the right emotional state. And there's this scene where he's really trying to break Will down, really trying to get those defenses down, really just matching him. And it's a great scene. It's one of the best two-handers, I would argue, in film. Go look it up on YouTube. If we're lucky, maybe we'll get a chance to put it ourselves at the bottom here. It's one of the best scenes where he's just going at it with Will. And he talks about his wife. And he talks about like how wonderful and how much he misses her. And then he talks about how when she was in bed, she would fart. Totally, of course, made up that line in this moment. You can see Matt Damon is laughing, not in character. He's breaking character, which they ended up incorporating into the film because it was impossible not to. But it's such a wonderful ability. In that moment, you really see what Robin Williams does so well, which is to take both humor and pathos and just meet in the middle. Another film that a lot of people liked a lot, I did too, I almost was sorry I didn't mention it first, was Dead Poet Society. Did you see that one, Randall?
Yeah, I've seen it. So Robin Williams is a professor in that movie, right? And he inspires his students.
He's an English teacher.
And it's funny to think of. Oh, he's a high school teacher.
It's a prep school English teacher. Okay. Yes, but he is based on an English professor, which is why it kind of blurs the lines.
It's funny to think this. I didn't know this till you revealed it to me today. But Houseman was his professor, literally his professor in college.
Yes.
I mean, you can't have a better model,
No, you can't. And I almost wonder if he's channeling a lot of the more radical professors when he's doing that, rip up. Look, he does Shakespeare.
Let me say something, because my mother, she told me a little bit about her experience in high school in the '60s. Here in California, she was in Orange County, she was in Compton, and yeah, man, in the '60s, that's how a lot of teachers were in high school, apparently. Yeah. So yeah, Dead Poets is a great window. What?
Remember, he says, "Rip up the preface to the page."
Exactly.
Introduction. I mean,
my mother told me a story. Okay, get this. It was an English class in high school. The teacher said, "Okay, I don't want you using punctuation in my class." I mean, I can't even imagine.
And again, it's one of those things where a man who's bucking convention, someone who's really trying to press these young people to stop thinking about what's right conventionally and be their authentic selves. Robin Williams seems just, again, so perfectly cast, because kind of like in Good Will Hunting, you don't really know what's coming next with that guy. We're all basically his students in Dead Poet Society because none of us know what this crazy person, we know he means well, and we know he's getting his signals like a mad prophet, but we don't know where. And yet at the same time, and this is maybe where his Juilliard training really helps. And again, when he is reading the soliloquies, when he is reading the poem, when he is talking about the road less traveled, you can see this is the man who knows his stuff.
Well, he's a great actor. I mean, every character he does, he completely inhabits it. He knows exactly what he's doing. I mean, he's a master.
Well, I would definitely say those are two roles which are so tailored to his training, his strengths, his time working with young people, his time working, and then just to throw it off and completely in a different direction and to go back to really, I do think a great theme of him, which is Robin Williams, the cartoon character, the genie in Aladdin, very popular.
Well, let me just say about animation. Okay, so Aladdin's a Disney animated movie. Usually with animation, you have a script and you read the lines. A lot of times, you don't have scene partners. You just have a script and you read the lines a few different times, and then the sound editor decides which one to use, and they cut it together. But with Aladdin, they brought Robin Williams. The story is they brought him in and they wanted him to riff, so they bring him in and he just riffed. And they just stuck him. They stuck a bunch of them in, and then they had to animate his riffs. I mean, it was a great idea. I mean, if you watch the old Aladdin movie, it's unique. I mean,
it is, and also, correct me if I'm wrong, but didn't at that period in history, Disney would draw the facial reactions of the actors to get the animation. So the expressions of the genie are built out of the expressions of Williams.
Yeah, so we talked in another episode about rotoscoping, how Disney loved rotoscoping. But yeah, I mean, I think they recorded Williams, and I don't think they used a lot of rotoscoping in this movie, but I'm sure the animators looked at the recordings, the video recordings, and used that for their basis of their character. Yeah.
And animation was such a perfect blend for his style of because all of a sudden he'll impersonate Jack Nicholson, and then the animators will change his face to look like Jack Nicholson. I mean, that is so perfect because, I mean, there would be only a few years later a TV series on Comedy Central called Dr. Katz, which was an animated show where stand-ups would be interviewed by this stand-up psychologist, Dr. Katz, and their humor would be illustrated. But to see Williams's own manic style set in Disney colors. Also, it's, I think, the first time you really get to see him sing. And he has a good singing voice. He would have been, if this was the 50s or the 40s or the early 60s, he would have been a really good musical theater actor because he knew how to belt. He knew how to sing in character. He had that razzmatazz. It's really interesting to watch Will Smith, who's a very talented singer and a very talented dancer, and certainly a man full of pizzazz. Watch the live action Genie. Watch his version of some of the musical numbers. They're not bad. They're pretty amazing. They're very good. But can he top Robin Williams? Can he? No. And I think it's very clear with all the magnificent power that he has as a musical performer, the fact that he's trying very hard to match Williams and still only getting halfway there is a testament to how good a singer, a musical theater actor Williams was. It's a real shame he would. Now I'm going to talk about another one where he does sing and dance. It was an adaptation of a 1981 French film known as The Cage aux Folles called The Birdcage. This was interesting because it allowed him to work with one of the great comedic filmmakers, I think, Mike Nichols. In it, he is paired with the comedic. He is in a gay couple with Nathan Lane as his partner. Their son is about to get married to a woman whose father is a conservative senator. The conservative senator is played by Gene Hackman. His wife is played by Diane Wiest. The gay couple has a houseboy played by Hank Azaria. I believe it's even written by Elaine May. It's the last of the May Nichols scripts, this adaptation, which had already been a Broadway musical called The Birdcage. And did you ever see this?
Yeah, the Robin Williams and the Birdcage, sure.
I don't even know if this is the first time he plays a gay character. I don't think it is, but for some reason it might be.
He wasn't gay. He wasn't gay.
Yes, he's gay in The Birdcage. It's a gay couple.
No, I'm saying in real life, Robin Williams is not gay.
No, I'm not saying it's the first time he's playing a character who's gay.
Right. And I'll just say, let me just say something about this.
With Nathan Lane, who is in fact gay.
Yes, so, yes. He's a couple with Nathan Lane.
Nathan Lane is both playing gay characters and is a gay character. Yeah.
Yes.
My point is not that. It's just, it is a very interesting, for its time, that was a pretty shocking thing. This, when gay marriages in America were not yet legal, I want to point out, is the only point I'm trying to make here, is that this was a much more conservative, even though Clinton was president, this was a time where the Gay Marriage Act was defeated, where gays were told they could only serve in the military as long as there was don't ask, don't tell. So it was a very, Williams, I don't know if he did any political films, but to me, this one at least had some bite in that sense. You were going to say?
Yeah, so Williams plays a gay man. I think, shall we say, he's a little bit like swishy, shall we say? Like he's his normal Robin Williams, but he
plays a drag queen.
Right.
A female impersonator without apology.
Right. And it's interesting that Robin Williams throughout his career, he did characters like that. He did black voices sometimes. I don't think he ever did like a blackface character, but he never really got criticized for any of that.
because I don't think he ever punches down. When he does the character, he does it with complete gravitas. He never makes the character. You can say a little bit about Hank Azaria in that movie.
Is Hank Azaria in that movie?
Yeah, he plays the houseboy. It's a very swishy Colombian houseboy. So it's questionable. It's the kids would say problematic on 2 levels.
So wait, you're telling me Robin Williams is getting swishy and so is Azaria, but only Azaria takes it over the line?
No, because I'm not saying. I think that he's not getting swishy. Is my point. Williams is not swishy. He is playing a gay man who makes his living as a female impersonator.
Well, I want to say,
he gives it a lot more gravitas,
right,
than you would expect. I love the French film, but I don't even, and I think the French film is actually better. But I don't think that the performance by the lead gives the character of Albon in the French film, I forgot what he's called in the American version. I don't think he gives him the same degree of respect and gravitas that Williams does. William doesn't give it commentary. It's a lovely dance scene, by the way, between him and what's her name from The Good Wife, who has her own TV show now?
Christine
Baranski. Okay. And they're wonderful dance scene between 2 exes, and it kind of really shows you. Anyway, it's a nuanced performance, and for a guy who is known more for playing big, I always found it a surprisingly reined-in performance, all things considered.
From Williams.
Considering what the subject was, he really. You make a good pretty tight.
You make a good point. I mean, even when he's trying to, like in the Birdcage, he's trying to bring across some kind of like stereotypical character. He understands he needs to ground the character in reality, make it into a real person, so he doesn't get criticized for trying.
Well, he never really falls into the stereotype, is what I'm saying.
Right.
He is a devoted husband. He is a good father. He is a professional impersonator. He has got a good relationship with his ex-wife. The point of the movie, I hate to spell it out, is that there's something incredibly normal about gay marriage.
Right.
And, obviously poor Gene Hackman has to take the blunt of it. But anyway, it's certainly a movie that is not aged poorly. And it is interesting. Now, a film that only 1 or 2 people brought up. He was nominated for an Academy Award for Best Supporting Actor, and yet this is not a movie that people talk about. I find it amazing because, hey, it's a pretty far-out film. It's The Fisher King, directed by Terry Gilliam, starring Jeff Bridges, co-starring Robin Williams. The script, I believe, I forgot the name of the screenwriter, one of my favorite screenwriters, and yet I can't remember his name. But the concept behind this would be, if Howard Stern had told a guy to go kill himself, the guy does kill himself, then Howard Stern loses his job, and he just kind of bums around New York City, and he meets a man who thinks that he is Don Quixote, and he has discovered his Esmeralda, this woman who he believes. So he's this, and that very insane, wonderful guy is played by Robin Williams. You saw the film, right?
Oh yeah. It's been a while, but yeah, I've seen it. It's Williams plays. He's crazy, right? He's kind of out of his head. The character he's playing.
He is a man who is clearly traumatized by loss, just like Bridges is traumatized. But the difference between those 2 men is that Bridges is aware, lives in the world, but is full of guilt and self-hatred and self-destruction. And the Williams character has escaped into a world of make-believe, and it's not a funny performance by Williams. It's really...
There's very few laughs from Williams in there.
He is funny in his mind. He is zany. It is all the things a comic... He's using all of his comic skills, but he's using it in a way to make you realize there's something very... I hate to say that this is close to the bone. I really don't want to talk too much about Williams' own psychological issues, but he is playing a manic character. He is playing somebody who is clearly suffering, and it really hits you when you watch.
And the effect isn't comedy. It isn't humor. It's pathos. You feel sad for him the whole time.
And in such a yes, you really do, and it really forces and in all of the films that we're talking about, what as a supporting actor, playing off against Jeff Bridges, Gene Hackman, our young Aladdin, uh, Ethan Hawke and the guy from House with three names, Robert
I
Robert
forget. I forget.
whatever. And then, he's always cast against these other actors who, in order for them to grow in all of those films, have to either learn something from Williams. In all of these films, Birdcage, Fisher King, Aladdin, Dead Post, he is always a mentor of sorts. He is always there to show our hero what a moral universe should look like, or what is the crazy in them that they're in denial of.
Yeah, you're right. I never thought about it. You're right. Yeah.
He plays a very specific heart man. Now, as a leading man, which again, and this occurs simultaneously. We've already talked about Popeye. I briefly wanted to mention Awakenings because I haven't seen Awakenings. You've seen Awakenings, right?
Yeah, well, it's based on a true story.
Plays Dr. Oliver Sacks, who was a famous neurologist, real guy. Go ahead, based on a true story.
Yeah, so I mean, Williams. There's some characteristic Williams riffing in this movie, but Williams is trying to play a real person. I mean, Williams takes the back seat to the true story on this one.
Isn't it about he works with patients who have been catatonic with drugs therapy?
Yes, I don't want to reveal too much. It's a sad, it's a happy story.
Robert De Niro is one of the patients in it.
Yes.
So in this one, Robert De Niro is the supporting actor, and Robin Williams is the lead. And again, look at how well he works. And in this time, he's the sane and sober one, right?
Right.
It is interesting, by the way. We are not going to mention it, but he played a number of doctors that were real doctors, like Patch Adams.
Well, these are all doctors that are supposed to have a zany side, I guess, and that's why they cast Williams. And also, Williams has the acting chops. I mean, and he's the right age, and I mean, he, and let's be honest, Williams can impart a certain gravitas, like you're talking about, to a role that a lot of actors are not capable of. I mean, I think as a person, you have to have a certain degree of sophistication and intelligence to be able to do a character like that. And there's not a lot of actors, I think, that could do those kind of characters.
And that's him working with Penny Marshall, the sister of Gary Marshall, the person who cast him. His first film after Popeye, the one that gets him on the critical map, is an adaptation of Jonathan Irving's The World According to Garp. And that is also another one of those movies where he is playing it's a story of a writer's life who interacts with different people in the course of it. Again, I don't want to give too much away. It also includes John Lithgow and what's her face from Damages and
Glenn Close.
Glenn Close, thank you. My memory is so bad it's become a trivia game. But in it, he is a young writer. He is a smart man. It's again kind of like what we're talking about here, where he is a man with a certain degree of gravitas and open-mindedness and strangeness. And it's kind of nice because that's after Popeye. It wasn't sure if Robin Williams, and after Popeye and Mork and Mindy, the question became, can Robin Williams play human beings, really grounded men? And the answer was yes with Garp, which is what you're also seeing again in Awakenings. And I think in that sense, my favorite, and a lot of people's favorite movies where you really just see him play a very human man, not a crazy man, a very human man, but at the same time really got Robin Williams to do what Robin Williams does like no one else does, zany. Like really a great combination is Good Morning Vietnam, which he also was nominated for an Academy Award, directed by Barry Levinson, where he once again played a real person, Adrian Cronauer, who was a disc jockey in Vietnam, who did all sorts of voices, who did sketches, trying to keep the troops happy, which you could not have imagined anybody more perfect for Robin Williams to play.
Yeah, there's a lot of Williams classic riffing in this movie. It's Williams sitting in front of a microphone in a radio studio, doing a radio show, and he gets to be this zany DJ.
Good morning, Vietnam. I'm sorry, I couldn't help myself. You can do it too, folks. If you're listening, take a beat, so you can get it out of your system. Go ahead. 1, 2, 3. Good morning, Vietnam. Go ahead.
Exactly. So, yeah, and there's some story there. There's a story in this movie.
Well, it is a consequential film because it is taking place in Vietnam, and therefore it does deal with the very serious issues of the U.S. intervention in Vietnam, lives lost, path of these tragedy, and it kind of, again, this is one of the things that Williams is able to do is both be a clown and be a man, a sensitive man, an emotionally aware man in the moment, so that you get to see both you get to see the two sides of the man in this film. It's it's so nuanced because he's trying so hard to put on a happy face and make things good for the soldiers, while at the same time he comes in with a certain naivete. And again, we're trying to not, this is a spoiler-free version of the show. We're giving away no endings. You're really trying very hard. He's learning, and what he learns is very disturbing. And I think this is why a lot of people really, unlike Dead Poet Society, where he's iconic, unlike even Aladdin or any of the things we've mentioned up to this point, I actually feel like as Adrian Cronauer, he's the most like us. You know what I'm saying? He's not crazier than us. He's not funnier than us. Oh, he's funnier than us, but he's not crazier than us. He's not brighter than us. He's not more iconic. It's Levinson, who started out in comedy himself, I think really knows how to get, though he would do some terrible films with him later, I think he knows how to get something out of Williams other directors don't, which is that ability to make him seem both very funny and simultaneously very much like us. And I think that's why it's certainly one of his best films. Now, I wanted to talk about stuff that you and I are personal faves, things that you may have overlooked, that if you've got Netflix or HBO Max or YouTube or Amazon Prime, hopefully you can find some of these films because they're great and they show a different range of Williams, and they're not the kind of stuff that often people talk about. So the first one I want to talk about is a 1981 film, or 82 film, directed by Paul Mazursky, Moscow on the Hudson. In this movie, he plays a Russian defector who defects to New York City, and he is fully in character for the entire time. This is Robin Williams as a Russian emigre. Also features, I forgot the name of the Puerto Rican actress now. Great. Maria Alonso Conchetta. I can't pronounce her name. Anyway, it is a very, Mazursky does these wonderful New York stories, like Next Stop Greenwich Village and Unmarried Woman, and he understands really what it's like to be an ordinary person in New York. And it's a bittersweet comedy, and it's all really seen through what is it like after you've defected. Because the defection happens in Act 1, and it happens like in a Bloomingdale's window. I actually walked by Bloomingdale's the day they actually filmed the defection scene. So I didn't see him. My buddy's like, look, there's Robin Williams outside of Bloomingdale's. Like, no way. I'm like, oh yeah, there's a camera crew. They're filming Robin Williams. So I would never meet him. So I'm very jealous of those of you who have. But it's a very subtle performance, what he learns about life in the new world, what he learns about himself. And it's as if a Russian actor, as if there was a Russian Robin Williams. And he's so committed to it. Is there you were telling me earlier about a movie you like called World's Greatest Dad.
Yeah, I think so. World's Greatest Dad, Death to Smoochy, 1 Hour Photo are very dark.
Right, we're going to cover all of them. So tell me about World's Greatest Dad, because I never saw it.
Well, it's just it's a dark movie. It's an independent movie. I think it's Bobcat Goldthwait and Robin Williams. There's not a lot of laughs. It's a dark performance from Williams. If you like dark indie movies, then it's definitely worth it. I love the Bobcats
he was really
movies.
Good at playing dark guys. I mean,
he's good at playing everything, Chris.
Well, Cadillac Man, which came out in 1990, which is weird because it's during the height of his career, and I think around the time of Good Morning Vietnam, believe it or not, and Awakenings came out that same year. But no one ever talks about it. It's directed by the Australian filmmaker Roger Donaldson on a script by Bruce J. Friedman. He plays a Queens, New York used car salesman. It's a farce. He has 12 days to meet quota. He has a one wife, two mistresses, one of them played by Fran Drescher. Uh, he's got a mob debt to fill, and all these horrible things are going on. And Tim Robbins comes into the car lot and takes everyone hostage. And the whole movie really just takes place in it. And Williams did spend time at a Queens used car lot doing the actual research, not just getting the accent right, which coming from New York City, I have to admit, it's a pretty damn good Queens accent, but getting the idea of what it's like, he did some good work. And he and Drescher and he and Pamela Reed and he and Tim Robbins, again, has great chemistry, but he doesn't, this is a performance that you would have expected more from an Elliot Gould or from a Bill Murray. It's a much darker, much grittier, much more of a middle-aged man. He's not a man-child in this. And another variation of this is the Danny DeVito film that comes out in 2002 called Death to Smoochy, where he plays he's a children's clown who's got a TV show who ends up losing his job. He gets replaced by Ed Norton, who plays a happy rhino. And again, he's just a nasty, cynical. It's a black comedy of the blackest kind. But again, you see it, just a very gruff, and it just works very well. It's a very salty performance, which then leads us to a whole subgenre, which I'm only going to mention one film, but if you look at the end of his career, he did a lot of these. Robin Williams as a villain. He does a movie called 1 Hour Photo, which came out about 10 years ago, where he plays a guy who works back when people would have, in the olden days, children, people would take photographs and then they would go and get them developed at your drugstore, like a CVS. And he played the guy who was in charge of developing your photo. And he I don't want to give too much away, but he does some very unnice things. And that same level that made him so funny and so crazy also breeds a certain kind of malevolence. It's quite chilling, wouldn't you say?
Well, I mean, he's just a great actor. He just knows
Right. Did you ever see him though? Ever as a villain in any of the other things? Like he's in the American production of Insomnia. Have you ever seen him play the bad guy?
Maybe just some World's Greatest Dad.
Right. So there's something about him being nasty and bad and unlikable. And maybe it's because we like him. It's amazing. I mean, this is, I think, the thing about Robin Williams that I think as a human being, we always felt like we knew him and that there was something about him that was very likable, whether he was doing interviews. So my teacher, Cynthia Seghetti, told me that she was once in a restaurant in Hollywood and they were being very snobby to her and they wouldn't let her in. And she pointed out to Robin Williams and she said, "I'm with Robin." And Robin's, "Oh, this is Cynthia, my friend," and just opened up doors. My girlfriend Kelly, who's a stand-up comic, she saw him in Atlanta and she just literally accosted him in the parking lot and she said he was very nice. And they talked about Jonathan Winters, who we haven't talked about, but Jonathan Winters was a comic who just did characters, nothing but characters. And Williams was a big fan of him and put him on Mork and Mindy. And this is just when Jonathan Winters had died. And he told Kelly, a complete stranger, that he was feeling sad because he missed the loss of Jonathan Winters. And the ability to be that open and be human. And this all leads us up to you, Randall. You have an actual experience with Robin Williams. Please tell us about this.
Well, it's nothing special, Chris, but
It is special because you please.
All right. Well, I a little bit before he died, like I don't know, like a few years before he died, he did some shows at small comedy clubs in LA, improv shows, because I guess I heard that he always loved to do improv. You know, he had started out doing improv when he was really young, and he loves improv. I mean, he's a natural. He just loves to get on stage and just make everything up. So I remember the first time it was at the UCB on Sunset and over by the Bourgeois Pig over there, and he there was no advertisement, just word of mouth. It got around that Robin Williams, he was shooting a movie in town or something. Word got around that he wanted to go do improv at the UCB because he just wanted to do improv, and so I show up to the UCB, and there's like a crowd of people outside the theater, right? And I think I was with this girl I was dating at the time, and I'm like, well, we're never gonna get in the front door, but I knew the UCB really well, so we went around to the back door, and we went in the back door.
Oh my God, you snuck in?
Yeah, so we knocked on the back door,
Yeah.
and somebody opened it because I know all the secrets. All right, so I knocked on the door, somebody opened it, and we're like, hey, how's it going? And I just grabbed my girlfriend's hand and we walked in, like we owned the place, and it was just some other kid or something. And so we walked in, go to the stage area, and yeah, it's the most packed I've ever seen that theater, ever. And the seats are filled, people are standing. I mean, they couldn't pack more bodies into this place. And we found a spot to stand, and yeah, I mean, Williams did improv. I mean, he was great. He was electrifying.
So what was it like to watch him do improv? You went to improv school. You went through all the levels and at iOS. So
Well,
how would you evaluate his style and his technique?
how would I evaluate it? Okay, well, Williams is an old improv guy from the olden days. He's from the days when improv was new, and people were experimenting and doing whatever they wanted. Nowadays when people do improv, they go to an improv class, and they learn all these rules, and all these schools have different rules. I mean, Williams doesn't care about any of those rules. I mean, he gets up and he just says whatever, does whatever. I mean, his scene partners, they have to go with him on his ride, or,
Is he a generous performer? Did he follow other people's leads?
I'll say this about Williams, watching him, because I watched him a second time, which I'll talk about in a minute. But a lot of celebrities, I think I said this the other show, but a lot of celebrities, when they get on stage and do improv, they're afraid. Even like people that aren't that famous, they have like a TV show or something, they get on stage, there's some degree of fear, that they'll throw out something, and they'll get in trouble for it, right? It'll be on TMZ or something. People are recording it. They ask people not to record. People always secretly record. And by the way, I wish I had recorded Robin Williams at the.
I'm sure someone did.
No, you know what? I never saw any video, so I don't think anybody did. But I wish somebody had recorded him. I could have recorded him at the IO, but I had my camera set up. I used to record shows there, and he came in to do a show. Actually, I was taking photos. I took photos of it at the IO. But
this is your second meeting with him,
the
right?
second time I saw him. He's just completely fearless. Okay, so to be generous in improv means you're constantly throwing out material that your partner can use, and Williams would do that. I mean, a lot of celebrities don't do that. Okay, they wait for the performer. They go along for the ride. But Williams. He didn't hesitate. And, he wasn't afraid to go blue. He wasn't afraid to go dirty, which, like, I don't think any celebrity improvisers want to do, okay? For obvious career-ending reasons, okay? A lot of people that do improv nowadays, they're actors. They want to have, like, a good acting career. They don't want to screw up their acting career by doing some kind of edgy improv, right, Chris? I mean, they're like... Yeah. Robin Williams didn't care about that. He was at the end of his career too. I mean, but in Robin Williams, he was still working. I mean, when he did the UCB performances, he literally was shooting a movie at the time. I mean, he just didn't care, So yeah, it was great to watch him. I mean, and you know what?
And you talked to him afterwards?
I'll get to that. So watching him was kind of like a window into like the early days of improv when there weren't any rules, especially probably on the West Coast. Chicago improv.
Did he remind you of Mork in that way? Like,
oh yeah, of course,
like watching the Mork and Mindy.
Yeah, of course. I mean, if you ever watch Mork, yes, of course. So watching him on stage was just like his riffing with Mork and Mindy. It was the same kind of thing. Any kind of riff, even on talk shows.
For just a sec on this, because I want to do. So I know in stand-up, there's a technique in the stand-up called act out. And in it, not only do you make a joke, but then you act out how it would play out. And if you look at like the comedy albums, like Live at the Copacabana or whatever, he will tell a joke, then he'll act it out. And I know that in improv, it really informs how to do a good act out, so that you can literally just a suggestion of something, and then you are immediately going to do whatever that inspires. So when you saw him performing live, was there any things where there was like audience participation where they threw something, a suggestion?
Um, he was really receptive to the audience. So no, people weren't yelling suggestions, but people were applauding, laughing,
So was it
yelling.
a long form, or was it a game? Like, did they do games, or was it more like the Harold, which is a long form improv sketch? For those of you who are not
Well,
new to
here's
it.
what you don't get, Chris. Robin Williams doesn't know what the games are. Okay, he didn't go to improv school like 2 years ago, 3 years ago, 10
So
years
when he's
ago.
on stage, does he like? Do they just? Does the audience make a suggestion of like a job, a
He's
location?
he's no modern improv. You may make a suggestion at the beginning. You may have an audience suggestion at the beginning, or you may not. But there's not a lot of audience interaction in modern improv. At least not the improv I've seen. You what you do is somebody jumps on stage, starts doing something like a physical action, and then somebody else just decides to jump on stage with them. And so you have a team of like 6 people, 8 people, and they just choose to jump on and off the stage as the show goes on for like an hour, 2 hours, whatever. So Robin Williams is standing just off stage with the other team, with the rest of the team, and he's choosing to jump on and off, just like everybody else on the team is choosing to jump on and off. So, I mean, they may have
Does
discussed.
he play multiple characters when he jumps on?
Uh, he might, but when you jump on and off, you're supposed to stay in one character. If you jump on, you don't change characters before you jump off.
Do you remember any of the characters he played in any of the improv?
Yeah, the second time I saw him as a waiter, he played a waiter, and then at a restaurant, and he got really dirty. He started talking. I think he started talking about the pepper grinder being as big as his thing, his man thing, and started getting really dirty about it. I mean, it's like you'd never see any other celebrity do that. I mean, he just didn't care. And Robin Williams, he's done like really dirty stand-up specials, so he's not gonna shock anybody. Yeah, the second time I saw him, I was a photographer at IO West, and I took pictures of the show. I went backstage and took pictures of him and the cast. He was a soft-spoken guy backstage. He's a very small guy. He's just a really nice guy. I mean, he's exactly what you'd think. He's like a nice middle-class guy from the suburbs. He's exactly what you think. And when he's alone, when he's not on stage, when he's not performing, he's off. Okay, at least what I saw, he was off. He wasn't like he's not. He's performing. Okay, he's a normal person off the stage is from what I saw.
Well, that's great. I've only heard good things about Robin Williams, and I'll be honest, he's hit well over 100 films, and maybe even 200. I should have looked it up, but I think it's fair to say that neither you nor I have. Look, we didn't even mention Miss Doubtfire because neither of us saw Miss Doubtfire. That's why we didn't bring it up, folks. Neither of us saw it. Okay, that's the only reason. There's so many Robin Williams films that I've seen that I didn't bring up, either because they weren't very good, or no, they weren't very good. If I didn't bring it up, it's either because I haven't seen them or they're not very good. Period. And I didn't bring up his TV work post Mork and Mindy because Louis C.K.'s a shithead. But I will say that was a pretty damn good performance on a shithead's show. I mean, Louis C.K. is a horrible human being. I hope he rots in hell. But Robin Williams is pretty good on that episode of Louis, wouldn't you say?
You know what? I don't know if I've seen it.
That was a good episode if you like Robin Williams, but I don't think anyone should watch it because I don't.
If you had to recommend, if somebody had never seen any Robin Williams and you had to recommend something, what would you recommend?
Well, that's a great question. I would recommend his comedy special on HBO. I really liked the first one because I had the album when it came out, the one from live from the Copacabana, because as great as an actor he was, and we'll do another episode one day on him as a stand-up. I just think, and the last stand-up show he did on HBO, and the name's eluding me, but it was after he'd come out of recovery and well after doing any of his TV stuff. It was in the late '80s, maybe even the early '90s. I mean, it was very good, very human, very moving. That, and if you were going to recommend one Robin Williams movie, yeah, screw it. I would go with Dead Poets Society, or I would go with Good Will Hunting, or I would go to Good Morning Vietnam. Sure. Anyway, it's funny, weird. The Robin Williams is the weirdest thing about Robin Williams, right? I asked a lot of people. He's a funny man. Name your favorite Robin Williams movie, and they almost always go with the one where he's not funny.
Which
Like,
one's that?
whatever the movies we've just mentioned are all the non-funny movies. Like if you ask someone to name their favorite Bill Murray movie, they'll say Stripes, they'll say Meatballs, they'll say Caddyshack. You ask someone to name their favorite Steve Martin movie, they're going to either go with The Jerk, or they're going to go with Dead Men Don't Wear Plaid, or Roxanne, or The Lonely Guy. But no other funny man that I can think of
That's because
are going to go with their serious stuff instead.
that's because most comics haven't done an incredibly good serious movie.
Well, even if they have like an Eddie Murphy, like, oh yeah, he was good in Dreamgirls, sure. Like they'll do one star turn. All the actors I've mentioned, Bill Murray in Lost in Translation, Steve Martin in something, I have no idea what, but all of them will do one or two good serious roles. But I mean, it's very weird to think that there's literally a school of people who have only known Robin Williams as a serious actor, not as a funny man. So
I would recommend as a
what would you
Robin
recommend?
Williams gateway. I'd recommend Aladdin, but if you'd rather see him in live action, maybe The Birdcage.
Okay. Well, thank you so much. There's so many more Robin Williams movies to be seen that we have not seen. I look forward to spending the rest of my life watching all of them, the obscure, the good, the bad, rewatching them. He was with me ever since I was 12, and I feel like his work will last with us for the rest of our lives. Until then, I'm Chris.
I'm Randall.
Thanks for listening. Thanks for watching.
Bye.
Bye.